musicologist. Welcome to Amari Music Talk. I'm Richard Cole. If you're new to the channel, welcome. A long-time listener, welcome back. All right, today want to put the purple spotlight on one of the godfathers of the Minneapolis Sound, talking about the late, great Pepe Willie. We can do a whole 2-hour show just on this brother alone, but in the words of Bobby Z, Prince's career probably would have turned out a little bit differently had it not been for the mentorship of this amazing musician, producer, songwriter, someone that's seasoned in the music business, that was not only a mentor to Prince, but to Andre Simone, Morris Day, anybody that needed help. This was the guy that you went to. But today, like I said, we could speak volumes, paying tribute to this man. But today I wanted to talk about the collection of recordings that have come out in various configurations pretty much since about 1986. These were recordings that were done in 1977, and it featured a young Prince, long before he got his record deal. Andre Simone, Bobby Z are on these sessions, and I'm talking about the album 94 East. And this is the copy that I have. Now, I bought, I think, like the original cassette back in 86. So, it's 86. This is post Purple Rain. Prince is a superstar. These recordings come out to showcase, like I said, the genius in training, the genius making his bones, learning about the studio, learning about songwriting. And it was through these sessions that that we hear Prince doing his thing, helping out, doing his thing, learning the craft. Like I said, this has come out in different configurations, different sequences. To me, this collection, I think it's the most polished out of all of the other versions. But when I listened to it, when I first heard it in 86, let me just go back to that. The selling point was the song, Just Another Sucker. And that's one, it's all Prince on that one. I think he wrote it or co-wrote it. And, like I said, this is post Purple Rain, post Superstar. On the surface, it looked like a cash in, looked like a cash grab. I think Prince initially tried to have it stopped at one point. But, listening to it, especially those of us that have come up through For You, that have come up through the second album, this is a track, even though this is done like a year before Prince's first album, even before he started, like I said, long before a record deal, and even long before he started recording his first album. This is a track to me that would not have been out of place, but that was the selling point. And then, I got the cassette and, listened to it. And it's kind of like, well, we've heard For You. We've heard, the stuff from the second album. To me at that time, Just Another Sucker was like probably the strongest thing on here. And because this wasn't like, full on Prince recordings at that time, just kind of really lost interest. But kind of as the decades went on, I found myself kind of revisiting this, more and more Prince books that would come out and more information about the early days would come out. And, I just got a little bit more interested in this particular era of Prince's career. So when I heard about this particular compilation, I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and check this out. I don't know if I did it on streaming first and then bought it. But long story short, I did get this compilation. And listening to it, I think because it's, it's mastered better. than previous iterations of it. That I was able to really get into the songs more. And instead of judging them on, early formation versus, full blown genius, it's like I got a different appreciation for this particular compilation. There are numerous, I think like mostly 5 tracks that definitely feature Prince, whether it's playing guitar, whether it's keyboards. There's a track that it's Andre Simone on bass and Prince on everything else. And I don't know, it's solid material. And I think what the goal with this was to try to get a record deal, which they did end up on the radar of Polydor Records. So basically, like I said, this is the CD here. So, like I said, the tracks on this, listening with a different set of ears, well, more patient ears, more mature patient ears. Like I said, there's a lot of potential in this. And yeah, you see Prince growing as a musician or learn, at that age, to be in a setting like that as a studio musician, you could see the growth taking place, but you could see the talent that's there too. Let's see if I can get the booklet out here. All right, and then this is the booklet. It's a lot of information. Probably the most extensive liner notes, like I said, from any iteration of this compilation. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there were some key things that kind of lend to some very key information on this album. Let's see. Let's start with the completed tapes in his possession. Let's see. Pepe, along with Wendell Thomas, flew to New York in April of '76 and literally beat the pavements until they got a deal. Around this time, drummer Alexander, let's see, I think this is Dale, might have been Dale Alexander, gave way to Bobby Z. Rifkin, who would later drum in Prince's first band, The Revolution, and Andre Simone came in on bass. They signed with Polydor for a one-off single and recorded 2 new numbers. Let's see, Fortune Seller and 1015. The latter one was written by Pepe Willie. These 2 sides were co-produced by Pepe and veteran Motown producer, songwriter, A&R guru Hank Cosby, who'd written Fortune Teller. Cosby brought soul singer Colonel Abrams in on vocals. Abrams went on to establish himself as a major name in the 1980s, but sessions did not go well. Prince allegedly clashed with Cosby, who was uninterested in the young guitarist's ideas. Props to Hank Cosby, but yeah, I probably should have listened to an idea too. But, this is young Prince, barely 18 at the time. And, that's a different story when you don't have a record deal and no foothold in the industry versus to when you gain that knowledge and wisdom in the game. So let's see. Let's get back to the album. So in a unfortunate turn of events, 94 East contract was canceled, a blow which thoroughly devastated Prince. And these 2 tracks remain unreleased to this day. They immediately reconvened in Minneapolis to lick their wounds and put down some new tracks. The very next day, they cut the rehearsal practice version of Dance to the Music of the World on their 4-track tape recorder. And a day later, went into Sound 80 Studios and cut Lovin' Cup and Just Another Sucker. That one's co-written by Pepe and Prince. The 2 further tracks, If You Feel Like Dancing and One Man Jam, were recorded a little later in New York, a trip which provided excellent experience for Prince, giving him professional studio exposure, which would be invaluable in the future. All right, these 5 sides indicate the fast growing maturity and versatility of Prince since the earlier Cookhouse 5 sessions. On Just Another Sucker, Lovin' Cup, and Dance to the Music of the World, he not only played guitar, but also drums and keyboards. Andre played bass, and Pepe played rhythm guitar. On If You Feel Like Dancing, Prince is on keyboards and guitar. And on One Man Jam, Andre is on bass, while Prince went crazy, thus quoting Pepe Willie, playing everything else. Pepe later added synth parts in the overdubs. The practice tape of Dance to the Music of the World has been included here to give inclusion of just how intense rehearsals could be. Pepe is on guitar, Prince on guitar and bass. Excuse me. Whilst Pepe, Prince, Marcy, and Christy are all on vocals. You can hear Prince crack a joke just before they start to play, saying, "I was out with my old lady and she said, 'Jive, sucker, I'll kick you too.'" All right. Let's see. After everyone has laughed, you can hear Prince add, "I'm embarrassed." All right. So, yeah, like I said, listening to the tracks on this album, like I said, with more mature ears, like I said, there's a lot of potential. A lot of it is, I mean, it's definitely straight out of 1977. Some of it, like I said, it's Prince. You know, this is the template. Like I said, Just Another Sucker wouldn't have been out of place on For You. It wouldn't have been out of place on the second album. The track after that on this CD, If You Feel Like Dancing, to me, it kind of has kind of like a little early time feel. You know, if there was some lyrics, you know, I can hear this probably wouldn't have been out of place maybe on the first time album, or it might have been a pretty good B-side. You know, if it had some lyrics to it, you know, it would have been a good, you know, B-side from that first album era of the time. Let's see, Lovin' Cup, to me, not listening to this now, it feels almost ahead of its time. It's like it's of the 70s. It kind of reminds me of kind of like the slow, kind of like jazz feel that, you know, you would find on album cuts on Chic albums. But also, too, it feels like it's ahead of its time because it reminds me of a lot of the sort of soft, smooth, almost jazz fusion, kind of like you would hear in the 80s, kind of like between like 87, 88, kind of like slow ballad stuff you would hear like New Shoes. It reminds me of that type of stuff. Some of the girl groups like Expose or something, like it would, you know, one of their album cut ballads, it would remind me of that. So, you know, that song, it's kind of ahead of its time. I think that, you know, if they were able to get signed, like if the Polydor thing had gone through, I mean, granted, there was a lot of fierce competition, but there's no telling, you know, when you got Prince and Andre Simone there, if, like I said, if this group, this 94 East, was able to gain some momentum, you know, what kind of growth would they have been able to contribute to that? You know, what type of, you know, foothold would they have had in the music industry? You know, would they have gotten noticed? You know, would they become a major player in the late 70s and 80s? Or would they become a one-hit wonder? You know, it's hard to say that when you got Prince in your band, but we're talking, you know, 17, 18-year-old Prince, not superstar Prince. So, you know, who knows? But definitely, like I said, ahead of its time. Let's see, Dance to the Music of the World, One Man Jam. Again, like I said, these are, got to take into context that these are like, whether they're demos, whether they're trying to flesh songs out, just getting some sketches and ideas. But like I said, on this alone, to me, these songs wouldn't be out of place on if they ever do like a career spanning box set for Prince. Like your first disc, half of that disc should definitely include these songs, like Just Another Sucker, or if you feel like dancing, One Man Jam. Then after that, you got some of the demos that Prince was doing to try to get his record deal, by himself. So those early configurations of, Just As Long As We're Together, that wouldn't be out of place. So that first disc, but definitely include these tracks on the box set. One of the other standouts, If You See Me, which later morphed into, Do Yourself a Favor. This was a track that Prince was fond of. Here, this version, it's Pepe Willie, it's his song. I think it's his vocals that are on that. But this kind of has sort of, what was really big in the kind of the mid 70s, like early to mid 70s, thanks to things like Soul Makossa, Fela Kuti. There was kind of like this African sound that was kind of, being mixed into the funk. It was kind of like this cultural exchange where they were influenced by what James Brown was doing. Then a lot of the funk over here was influenced by what their interpretation of the funk was, mixed with those African rhythms. So this song, If You See Me, kind of has a little bit of that flavor to it. Not quite reggae, but to me, kind of more like I said, kind of like a Fela Kuti type thing or type vibe to it. Like I said, which again was really prevalent alongside the funk in the mid 70s. But like I said, Prince had a fondness for it. And around 1982, and you kind of hear it on the 1999 Super Deluxe edition where, he put his spin on it. And two, I think Jesse Johnson took a liking to it and did the actual cover of Do Yourself a Favor on the Shockadelica album. But if you want to hear it in its earliest form, the track here is called If You See Me. So definitely check that out. Let's see. Like I said, the rest of them, there's a couple of ballads that are on it. Like I said, they're demos. They're working things out. Like I said, you're hearing, young, barely out of high school or finishing high school Prince, and Andre Simone, got Bobby Z on the drums on some tracks, and working it out. But I'm glad that this is something that does exist for the diehard fans to hear, or if you're new to Prince and it's like, we bandy the word genius about so much, take a look and listen to and try to close your eyes and imagine, like I said, barely out of high school, before the superstar, before the purple trench coats and the hair and the shoes and the boots and, Purple Rain and all of that, it's the kid with a big afro, looking like one of the Silvers and playing just as strong as a Leon Silvers, to that level of professionalism. So by all means, definitely check this out. It is on streaming. So if you want to definitely check that out, check it out. You can probably still find this, whether you go to Amazon, Discogs might have some copies. To me, this is the definitive configuration of this project. But there are other versions of it. The more famous one is the one they got like a purple looking dove with a flower in its beak. There's that one. That was the one that came out in '86. There's, like I said, other configurations that have come out, I think, in the '90s. This one came out in, this is 20. That's what they get for putting stuff in purple lettering that you can't read it. But definitely, by all means, check it out. And let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Rest in peace, Pepe Willie. Thanks for all of you thank you for all you've done in the Minneapolis Sound. He has a website. There was a book that was published not too long ago, his autobiography called If You See Me. That's available on Amazon. You can go check that out. I'm looking forward to checking that out as well and taking a deeper dive into the history of the Godfather of the Minneapolis Sound. All right, so that's going to end this episode. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. By all means, become a Patreon supporter. And until then, create your day, create your life. Peace.